Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today is Friday, so this will be the Dollar Store Stack series for Week 8. It's kind of hard to believe that we're already in Week 8, but hey, if you're new to this series, this is where I go through, talk about some cheap quarterbacks that you can stack with some of their receiving options that allows you to pay up for premium positions elsewhere. So we're going to have 4 stacks on the DraftKings side and 4 stacks on the FanDuel side, so 8 stacks overall. There'll be some overlap in between sites, as you guys will notice throughout the video. But without further ado, we're going to get into it. And just keep in mind, just because I have a quarterback and like a couple of his different receiving options doesn't mean you have to play all those options. You can play one of them, you can play 2 of them to stack with your quarterback, and you'll turn out just fine as well. So the first one we got is Carson Wentz at $5,700. Essentially at that $5,700 price tag, you're trying to get like 19, 20 points out of him, averaging 18.5 essentially on the season. Been playing pretty well, honestly, kind of surprising. Still making some mistakes here and there, but overall, hasn't been too bad this season. The best option to pair with Carson Wentz is probably going to be Michael Pittman Jr., $5,300. And honestly, with him, you're looking for, if you get 18 points out of him, you're going to be real happy. Averaging almost 15 on the season, so very, very solid play there. Very good volume play as well. I didn't list anybody else, but you could definitely look at Nyheim Hines if you think this is going to be a game that the Colts are trailing. They haven't had too many of those lately, so he's been relatively ineffective. But in a GPP setting, you might want to chase that narrative and maybe stack it up with some Titans on the other side of Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown, somebody like that. Definitely a lot of options with that. And then you could look at like somebody like Mo Alley Cox as well, who's been scoring touchdowns at a pretty unsustainable rate considering how many routes he's actually running per game. But there's definitely some upside there as well. Zach Pascal, the second wide receiver, you could look at him too if that's something you want to do. But overall, Carson Wentz plus Michael Pittman Jr. looking like a pretty solid stack. In a way to get a little bit different since a lot of people are probably going to be chasing Michael Pittman Jr., but not a lot of people are going to be playing Carson Wentz this week. Then we move over to the second one, and this is the Cleveland Browns. And Baker Mayfield expected to be back this week despite having a bad left shoulder. A little bit risky here because at any moment he could get hit and get knocked out of the game with his shoulder too, so it makes for a great GPP play, especially since a lot of people aren't going to be on him. He's got some pretty cheap wide receivers this week in Odell Beckham Jr., $4,600. Probably the lowest price tag you're going to ever see on Odell. He's a little bit banged up too as well with his own shoulder injury, but he still should play in this game. Jarvis Landry banged up as well with his knee injury, $5,000. Decent play here as well. One of these two guys could pay off. I probably wouldn't play both of them with Baker Mayfield unless you're feeling really, really risky this week. But this is going to be, a little bit of a GPP stack that's going to really differentiate you. And if you hit, you're going to hit big time. Then I also listed the 2 tight ends for the Cleveland Browns. Harrison Bryant's another tight end too. I do like him quite a bit, but just not quite there this year. Hooper, is the one that sees the most snaps, runs the most routes, and everything like that. Hasn't been really efficient so far this season, but close on a couple of touchdowns, just haven't quite got there overall. David Njoku is obviously a bigger play tight end. We saw him have that crazy week, I believe it was against Arizona, so definitely some upside there with him as well. They both are relatively cheap at $3,000 and $3,100 respectively. So Baker Mayfield plus 1 or 2 of his options, you could build a real cheap stack. You can run it back on the Pittsburgh side. Maybe you get a Najee Harris, maybe you get a Deontay Johnson or a Chase Claypool. Then we'll move over to the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan's relatively cheap once again, $5,900, looking for about 20 points out. He's averaging almost 20.5 on the season. So he's been really good the last 3 games. Can't really knock him there as much as I want to talk about Matt Ryan getting old and regressing. There's still signs of it, but he still played relatively well. Granted, those were against 3 weaker defenses, 3 weaker teams overall. Carolina defense been really hit or miss this year. They were really good to start the year, but not quite as good lately. So Matt Ryan maybe has his way with them. We'll see if Stephon Gilmore ends up playing in this game for the Panthers. That could be another interesting factor as well. So you can stack Matt Ryan with some of his options. There's some pretty good ones here. There's Calvin Ridley, who's kind of underperformed all season. $6,600. Probably want to get 28 points out of him. He's averaging about 14 on the season. I think he only has 1 touchdown on the season so far. If you get that touchdown game out of him, plus the 14 points, that's going to pay off for his price tag. Russell Gage, we saw him return last week and do fairly well. $4,200 price tag. Not a guy that a lot of people are going to be chasing, so definitely an interesting GPP play there as well. And then Kyle Pitts, who's actually the most expensive tight end on this slate. You want to see him get like 20 points. Honestly, at the $6,300 price tag, 18 points at the very least. So there's probably going to be a lot of people chasing Kyle Pitts this week after the couple good games. Highest price tight end on the slate. So you're either going to go with him or you're going to pay down at the tight end position overall. At least that's going to be the mindset of most people. There's probably not going to be too many people stacking Kyle Pitts with Matt Ryan. And even better yet, if you stack Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, and Kyle Pitts, Falcons do pretty well, you're probably going to be sitting pretty as well. You could also look at some options on the other side to run it back with the Carolina side, maybe DJ Moore. Maybe you take that Robbie Anderson dart throw as well. Then last but not least, on the DraftKings side, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence, relatively cheap at $5,500. He's essentially averaging what you're looking for out of him on this slate at 17.5 points. If you get 18, it's going to be even better. If you get up to 20, that's going to be even better as well. Going against the Seattle defense has not been the best in the world this year or recently. So you got Trevor Lawrence, could have a very nice game. If he throws 2 touchdowns in this game, you're probably going to be relatively happy. Has a little bit of a rushing upside too as well. Nothing like too crazy there, but definitely something that's beneficial when you're talking in terms of fantasy and DFS in general. So we have 4 different wide receiver options that we could stack with Trevor Lawrence here. So the first one's Marvin Jones Jr. He's the most expensive at $5,900. Ideally, you like to get 18 points out of him at this point, averaging about 14 on the season. If he scores that touchdown, if he gets 2 touchdowns even, he's going to really boost your lineup over the top. Then we got Laviska Shenault, $4,700. Ideally, you want to get like 14, 15 points out of him. If he's not scoring that touchdown, he's probably not getting there unless he receives massive volume in this game. Playing on the outside, he really just hasn't been quite as good there, but definitely an interesting name. I think he'll be a little bit more popular too, given the slate and the matchup overall. Then last but not least, we got Jamal Agnew, who's kind of come onto the scene, playing that slot role for them now, $3,700. If you can get 12 points, 13 points out of Jamal Agnew, you're going to be sitting really pretty at that $3,700 price tag. He's going to be one of those interesting kind of like punt play range. I don't really call him a punt play. For me, punt play at wide receiver is $3,500 or less, but a relatively cheap pay down option at wide receiver. Definitely has some ability to pay off. Has seen some targets, and offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell loves this kid. I said it coming into the year. If you want to check that out, go back to the Gold Jacket podcast. I said they did not pay him $5 to $7 million a year just to be a kick returner. And I knew Darrell Bevell loved him when he was in Detroit and tried to get him on the field as much as he could. Now that you're seeing it come to more fruition, he looks pretty good out there too. So you can't really complain. If a guy's out there, he's performing and he's looking good, why not play him? And then last but not least, one of my favorite pay down options at tight end this week is Dan Arnold at $2,800. He's been seeing the targets. He's been relatively productive as well. He's a pretty athletic tight end overall. He's got the ability to get deep when he needs to, if they're asking him to do that. He can give you a big play. He can give you a touchdown. So that's the type of upside you want to chase, especially when you're paying down for a tight end option at $2,800. So Trevor Lawrence plus any 1 or 2 of these options looking pretty good this week against the Seattle Seahawks defense that has not been the best so far this season. But with that being said, these are the $4 store stacks for the DraftKings side. We'll keep moving over to FanDuel and talk about my stacks over there as well. So you'll see a familiar face here with Baker Mayfield on the FanDuel side, $6,500, typically the lowest you're going to get for a starting quarterback. Once again, there's still risk with Baker Mayfield coming off that shoulder injury, could get hurt at any point in time. So this is a GPP dart throw more or less. Then you got Odell Beckham Jr., $5,700, Jarvis Landry, $6,000. They're a little bit more expensive than the FanDuel, or they're a little bit more expensive than the DraftKings side, but you do expect that. Relatively similarly priced given the comparison between the two sites. Odell Beckham Jr., he could have a nice game. If he does, you're probably going to be sent pretty. That's probably going to be the cheapest price tag you're going to see him at all season. Jarvis Landry, he could definitely have a big volume game too as well if he does end up playing. Austin Hooper, David Njoku, both in play once again. Same thing I said on the DraftKings side still applies to them. If Austin Hooper gets that touchdown, he's probably going to be sitting pretty. If David Njoku gets 1 or 2 big plays, he's going to help you out as well. Then we're going right back to Jacksonville, which was not that long ago as well. And we got Trevor Lawrence, $6,700, so $200 over that essentially minimum starting price tag for a quarterback on the FanDuel side. And then once again, you have the same 4 receiving options to potentially pair with Trevor Lawrence. Marvin Jones Jr., $6,400. A little bit of a price up spot on the FanDuel side. He's priced up a little bit on both sides, though, obviously. But on FanDuel, touchdowns matter more. Marvin Jones Jr. has been known to score a touchdown or 2 or 4 in his day. I have to say 4 because he's one of the few players that scored 4 touchdowns in a game twice. If he does it again, I think that's the record, or he ties the record, I believe, with Jerry Rice. Don't quote me on that one, though. Laviska Shenault, $5,800. He's a little less appealing on the FanDuel side overall just because he's more of a volume play. If he doesn't score a touchdown, he's probably not going to pay off for you over there. Jamal Agnew, same thing, kind of that volume play, but $5,300. I'd definitely pay down to him from Laviska Shenault for that extra $500 savings. And then once again, Dan Arnold, $4,900, relatively cheap price for the tight end on the FanDuel side. So any one or two of these options paired with Trevor Lawrence could make for a big day. It's also important to keep in mind, James Robinson could also have a big day as well. So this stack has a little bit of volatility to it as well, but you can always run a DK Metcalf or somebody or a Tyler Lockett or somebody else like that on the other side if you're trying to game stack that. But we'll get over to the next one. It is Jameis Winston in a revenge game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Jameis Winston, $7,400. Not the greatest price tag in the world, but it's still relatively cheap compared to some of the other quarterback options. I do like him in this spot. Tampa Bay's defense has allowed passing yards, pretty good rate. I know they did get after Justin Fields pretty good last game. He had 5 turnovers, but the Saints offensive line is a lot better than that Bears offensive line too as well. Jameis Winston, he's been relatively safe this year. He's not making all these crazy turnovers, all these bad decisions. He's still a little bit inaccurate at times, but he's played relatively well this season. So you compare him with Marquez Callaway. You're looking for that guy that's really going to get deep over the top against this Tampa Bay defense. Marquez Callaway could be it. Traquan Smith came back last week. Didn't really do a whole heck of a lot, but Jameis tried to target him a few times. Sometimes it just didn't work out. Maybe week 2 back, they have a little bit more chemistry. And then we got the 2 tight ends with Adam Troutman and Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson at $5,000, a little bit too priced up for me, but if they're trailing in this game, they've shown playing him more on the field when in games they're trailing big and have to throw the ball in general. So if he gets a touchdown, if he gets a couple of receptions, he definitely could pay off for that price tag. Then Adam Troutman, he's been pretty involved. Like you look here, his fantasy points per game are only 2.5, but they have been trying to get him a little bit more involved. He's been playing a good amount of snaps. So there is some upside there, especially if he would end up in the end zone with a touchdown. And then last but not least, on the FanDuel side, we're going right back to the Atlanta Falcons. So we got Matt Ryan, $7,200. I do like that price tag. Once again, everything I said on the other side still applies. He's been beaten up on these weaker teams. Carolina's defense, a little bit hit or miss. We'll see what they look like this week. Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, obviously the 2 main options, $7,000 and $6,800 respectively. Not too badly priced, honestly, considering what Kyle Pitts has done lately and Calvin Ridley compared to what he could be in this game. Russell Gage is also in there, $5,600. Not trying to go after him as much on the FanDuel side. And as you see, the fantasy points per game for him is that bad number. So we're not going to talk about that too much. Matt Ryan, pair him up with Calvin Ridley, pair him up with Kyle Pitts, pair him up with both of them. It's going to be a great GPP stack this week. And I really do think that. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And then, once again, like I said, most people are probably going to play Kyle Pitts, but they're not going to play him with Matt Ryan. So if you play those two together, hey, you got a little bit of advantage already in your lineup compared to all the other Kyle Pitts lineups out there. And then once again, you can always run it back with that DJ Moore stack, the Robbie Anderson, the Chuba Hubbard, however you want to approach that game stack if you want to stack the Carolina and the Atlanta game together. But with that being said, these are my $4 store stacks for the FanDuel side and my 8 overall dollar store stacks for week 8. Hey, 8 for 8. But in general, if you guys have any questions related to the main slate for DFS, if you have any questions regards to any stacks for this slate, be sure to let me know. I would definitely be glad to help you out in that regards. And then while you're at it, down in the comments, let me know your favorite stack for this week. Could be one of the dollar store stacks I have listed here, or it could be another stack. Maybe it's a Josh Allen and a Stephon Diggs. Maybe it's a Josh Allen and a Cole Beasley. Maybe it's Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith. There's a lot of good stacks out there this week, and there's ones that could really pay off. So I think week 8 is going to be a great week overall for the NFL and for NFL DFS in general. But with that being said, if you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. And that's one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS, whether it's NFL or NBA, helping you with your fantasy football teams. Talking a little bit of NFL news, talking some injury updates, especially when it comes to the starts and sits. Unfortunately, we did get news today that Kylan Hill and Robert Tonyan from last night's game both did tear their ACLs. So that's going to impact fantasy football just a little bit, but unfortunately, it sucks to see players get injured. Thoughts and prayers go out to both of them and their family as they go through the surgery and the recovery for their respective injuries. And then with that being said, if you are new or current subscribers yet to do so, also hit that notification bell down below. It's going to let you know every single time I post up a new video. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. And then last but not least, special little shout out to each and every one of you watching today's video. I truly do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It definitely means a lot to me, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.